The vast hall of the Galactic Council gleamed with an eerie luminescence, its high ceilings covered in intricate, shifting constellations that moved in sync with the universe itself. Seated around a grand, circular table were representatives of the most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy. Ancient species that had ruled the stars long before humanity had even discovered fire. Towering insectoid warlords, sleek reptilian strategists, and sentient AI constructs all observed the newcomers with an air of condescension. At the center of the room, under the scrutiny of dozens of alien eyes, stood Ambassador Rachel Donovan, humanity's chosen delegate. She adjusted the cuffs of her crisp navy blue suit, carefully maintaining a mask of composure, even as whispers and laughter echoed around her. "This is a waste of time," rumbled a massive armored being, his golden exoskeleton reflecting the Council's soft light. He was High Commander Virox of the Zelvari Dominion, a species known for its conquest and battle-hardened warriors. Why are we even considering this? The humans barely qualify as sentient. Laughter rippled through the Council. Perhaps they seek our protection, sneered a silver-skinned, six-eyed alien from the Krell Empire. They are small and fragile. Their world is vulnerable. Should we find them a caretaker? A soft chime echoed as Chancellor Orion, a towering elder of the Galactic Council, raised a wrinkled, four-fingered hand for silence. His gaze settled on Ambassador Donovan. "Humanity has petitioned for recognition within our esteemed council," he stated in a deep, measured tone. "Their world, Earth, is young. Their reach among the stars is modest. Yet they claim to have warriors capable of standing against the finest among us." He raised a brow ridge. Skepticism thick in his voice. A bold claim. Donovan straightened her shoulders. "Humanity is not requesting protection. We are here to stand as equals." Murmurs rippled across the chamber. High Commander Virox let out a low, guttural laugh. "Equals?" He leaned forward, his crimson eyes narrowing. "Humans are weak. Your species relies on primitive weapons. Your bodies are frail, and you have no significant psionic abilities. You lack even the basic regenerative properties of most sentient life. What makes you think you belong in this chamber?" Donovan held his gaze. "Because while we may not have your strength, your size, or your technology, we have something else." Virox smirked. "Oh, and what is that?" A slow smile tugged at the corners of Donovan's mouth. "Resilience." The word hung in the air for a moment before another wave of laughter swept the chamber. "Resilience," mocked the Serpentine delegate. "Oh, how charming. They believe endurance will save them from a plasma cannon." Donovan exhaled slowly, then delivered the final push. "If humanity is so unworthy, then why don't you prove it?" She let her words sink in before continuing. "We challenge you to a trial of combat. One of our warriors against yours. A fair fight." A pause. Then the amusement returned. "A single warrior?" Virox chuckled darkly. "This will be entertaining." Orion tilted his head. "You understand that our champions are the finest our worlds have to offer?" Donovan met his gaze without flinching. "And so is ours." The Chancellor tapped his fingers against the stone table, considering. "Very well. The challenge is accepted." He turned toward Virox. "As the loudest opponent to humanity's petition, the Zelvari will provide a warrior for the match." Virox's grin was predatory. "It will be my pleasure." Earth's champion, back on the USS Olympus, a top-secret military installation orbiting Mars, Lieutenant Jack Carter sat across from a holographic display, the image of Donovan flickering before him. A veteran Navy SEAL, Jack had spent over a decade in combat zones across Earth before being reassigned to interstellar operations. "So let me get this straight," he said, leaning back in his chair. "They laughed at us, so now I get to punch one of their guys in the face?" Donovan sighed. "It's more than that. This isn't just about you. It's about proving humanity's place in the galaxy." Jack smirked. "Oh, I get that part. But let's be real. You and I both know they're expecting me to get my ass handed to me Donovan didn't argue, which is exactly why you need to win. Jack studied the data scrolling across the screen. His opponent was Commander Zarvas, a Zelvari warrior with cybernetic enhancements, 2 hearts, and a combat record longer than Jack's service history. The species stood at an average of 8 feet tall, weighed over 600 pounds, and had carapace armor resistant to most ballistic weaponry. In short, Zarvas was a living tank. Jack cracked his knuckles. So when's the fight? 3 days. Jack grinned. Plenty of time. Donovan arched a brow. You don't seem worried. Jack shrugged. I've fought worse. Jack, this isn't a bar fight. This is a death match. His grin widened. Yeah, for him. The Grand Arena. The Colosseum of Trials was an ancient battleground, a massive dome carved into the heart of a volcanic moon. Thousands of alien spectators filled the seats, their voices creating an unearthly chorus of excitement. The Galactic Council sat in a private viewing chamber above the arena, observing the spectacle below. At the center of the vast pit stood Commander Zarvas, his golden exoskeleton gleaming under the twin suns, his multiple arms flexed, claws clicking against his armored plating. Then, the human champion entered. Jack Carter walked onto the battlefield in standard SEAL tactical gear, his combat knife strapped to his chest, his posture relaxed. Compared to his opponent, he looked downright unimpressive. The arena filled with jeers and laughter. Vyrox sneered. That's their champion? A mere human in rags. Oryun frowned slightly. Perhaps they have hidden strengths. Vyrox chuckled. Then let's see them. The Chancellor raised his hand. The arena fell silent. The trial of combat begins now. A deafening roar erupted from the Zelvari warrior as he charged, his massive form thundering across the arena. The crowd leaned forward in anticipation. Jack just smirked and rolled his shoulders. All right, he muttered under his breath, eyes locked on his charging opponent. Let's dance. The ground trembled as Commander Zarvas thundered toward Jack Carter, each footstep sending ripples through the ancient stone floor. The Zelvari warrior was a monstrous sight. 8 feet tall, covered in thick chitinous armor, his 4 arms flexing with unnatural speed. His serrated claws gleamed under the twin suns, each capable of slicing through steel. Jack didn't move. Not yet. The crowd roared with excitement, the Galactic Council watching from their elevated seats. High Commander Vyrox, a smug grin on his golden exoskeletal face, leaned forward. He had seen this before. Lesser species, full of bravado, crumpling the moment they realized they were outmatched. Jack waited until the last second. Then he moved. A sidestep, a pivot, a flash of motion. Zarvas swung his lower set of arms in a wide arc, expecting to cleave the human in half. But Jack was already gone. He had ducked under the blow, rolling smoothly across the dusty arena floor. The Zelvari staggered, momentarily thrown off by the miss. Jack grinned. Slow. The crowd gasped, a mix of confusion and amusement. No one had ever dodged the Zelvari berserker's opening attack so effortlessly. Vyrox's smirk faltered. Beginner's luck, he muttered. But Jack wasn't done. Humanity's tactics. Jack knew exactly what he was up against. The Zelvari weren't just big. They were bred for war. Enhanced musculature, redundant organs, natural armor. Their entire physiology was built for combat. But size had its downsides. Mass was slow. Jack had fought opponents bigger than him before. He had gone up against towering insurgents in hand-to-hand combat, wrestled men twice his weight in waterlogged caves, taken down armored enemies with nothing but his knife. This wasn't any different. Zarvas roared, charging again, his upper hands raised to hammer down like wrecking balls. Jack sidestepped again, twisting as he moved. His combat knife, a military-grade carbon blade, flickered in the sun. With a quick slash, he dragged it across the Zelvari's left knee joint. A sharp, sickening crack echoed through the arena. The alien let out a guttural snarl as his leg buckled, forcing him to slam one of his lower hands into the ground for balance. His red eyes widened in disbelief. Jack smirked. Armor's tough, but joints? Not so much. The Zelvari were warriors, but they were overconfident. They relied on strength to overwhelm their enemies. Jack was going to cut him down, piece by piece. A new kind of warrior. The crowd fell silent as they realized something was wrong. The human wasn't running. He wasn't afraid. He was hunting. Jack circled Zarvas like a predator. His movements were fluid, controlled, calculated. Zarvas pushed himself up, fury blazing in his alien eyes. His claws twitched, a mixture of pain and frustration flashing across his face. Jack grinned. "What's wrong, big guy? Thought this was going to be easy." Vyrox slammed a fist against the council table. "Enough of this embarrassment. Finish him." Zarvas snarled, lunging forward, all four arms swiping in a deadly blur. Jack barely had time to react. He dodged the first slash, rolled under the second, but the third clipped his shoulder. Pain exploded down his arm as his combat vest tore open, blood seeping through the fabric. The crowd cheered, expecting Jack to go down. Instead, Jack gritted his teeth and smiled. "You hit like a girl," he muttered. Zarvas snarled in rage and attacked again. But this time, Jack was ready. He feinted left. The alien took the bait, swinging wide, leaving his ribs exposed. Jack lunged, twisting his body midair, and drove his knife straight into the Zelvari's side. The blade sank deep, puncturing through the gaps in his natural armor. A guttural howl erupted from Zarvas as he stumbled back, clutching his wound. Gasps echoed through the arena. A human had just drawn first blood. Vyrox's expression turned from amusement to rage. Oryun, the council elder, narrowed his eyes. "Impressive. The tides turn." Zarvas panted, his stance no longer confident. His injuries were slowing him down. The wound in his ribs was leaking dark green blood, and his left knee was still compromised. Jack, despite the cut on his shoulder, stood tall. He rolled his neck, shaking out his arms. Round 2, Zarvas roared in fury, launching himself forward in a last-ditch effort. Jack let him come. At the last moment, he dropped low, sliding beneath the alien's charge. As he passed, he drove his blade straight into the back of Zarvas' knee, twisting it violently. The Zelvari collapsed, slamming into the dirt. The entire arena fell silent. Jack stepped back, breathing hard but unbroken. He watched as Zarvas struggled to rise, his arms trembling, his once fearsome gaze clouded with disbelief. High Commander Vyrox shot to his feet. "Get up!" Zarvas couldn't. The crowd, moments ago filled with laughter, now sat in stunned silence. Jack wiped the sweat from his brow and flipped his knife in his hand before sheathing it. He stepped forward, towering over the fallen warrior. For a moment, he considered finishing it. A clean kill. That's what a Zelvari warrior would have done. Instead, he reached out his hand. Zarvas hesitated. Then, after a long pause, he took it. Jack pulled him up. A ripple of whispers swept through the council chamber. This wasn't just a victory. This was a statement. The human had won, and he had done it with honor. The aftermath. Oryun stood. His voice rang out over the hushed arena. The human, Jack Carter, is victorious. A mix of cheers, murmurs, and stunned silence followed. Jack turned toward the Galactic Council, ignoring the seething glare of High Commander Vyrox. He cracked his knuckles and smirked. "So," he said casually, "still think humans are weak." Oryun's expression was unreadable. Perhaps we were hasty in our judgment. Jack wiped a streak of blood from his arm. "Glad we cleared that up." Vyrox slammed his fist onto the table. "This proves nothing. The human merely got lucky." Jack grinned. "Luck? Yeah, sure. Let's call it that." He rolled his shoulders. "You want another round, big guy? I can go all day." Vyrox's jaw clenched, but he remained silent. Orion nodded slowly. Perhaps humanity has earned a second consideration. Jack smirked. He had won, but he wasn't done yet. The silence in the Galactic Council arena was almost deafening. The same audience that had laughed at humanity mere hours ago now sat in stunned disbelief. Jack Carter stood tall, blood seeping from the gash on his shoulder, his knife still slick with the dark green blood of his defeated opponent. Across from him, Commander Zarvos knelt on one knee, panting, his once imposing frame trembling from exhaustion and injury. Jack had done the impossible. He had beaten a Zelvari warrior in single combat. And yet, High Commander Virox wasn't satisfied. "This proves nothing," Virox spat, his golden exoskeleton glinting under the arena lights. "Melee combat is one thing, but real warriors fight with weapons, not just their fists and knives." Jack wiped sweat from his brow and shrugged. "Sounds like an excuse to me." The insult sent murmurs through the council chambers. Virox's crimson eyes flared with fury. "A true test of warriors must include armed combat. I demand a rematch, this time with weapons." Orion, the council elder, steepled his fingers in thought. It is unusual for a trial to continue after a conclusive victory. However, he turned to Jack. "Does humanity accept this challenge?" Jack didn't hesitate. "Damn right we do." Virox sneered. "Then it is settled. This time, there will be no tricks, no luck, just a fair fight." Jack smirked. "That's exactly what I'm counting on, preparing for the final fight." That night, Jack sat alone in his chamber within the council's military barracks, methodically sharpening his combat knife. The soft rasp of the whetstone against the blade echoed in the quiet room. Ambassador Rachel Donovan entered, her arms crossed, worry evident in her expression. "You sure about this?" Jack didn't look up. "If I wasn't, I wouldn't have said yes." Rachel sighed, stepping closer. "Jack, the first fight was barely in our favor. Zarvos wasn't prepared for how you fight, but he'll be ready this time. And if he gets ranged weapons," she hesitated, "you can't just dodge bullets." Jack stopped sharpening and met her gaze. "You ever seen a SEAL training regimen?" She sighed. "Yeah, I read the reports. Then you know we train for worst-case scenarios. I fought in zero visibility, underwater, against enemies who had me outgunned, outnumbered, and outclassed." He sheathed his knife. "This, just another day at the office." Rachel exhaled, shaking her head. "God help me, you're insane." Jack grinned. "Nah, I just know how to win." The arena, round 2. The next day, the arena was even more packed than before. The news had spread across the galaxy. A human warrior had beaten a Zelvari in melee combat. Now, everyone wanted to see if lightning could strike twice. This time, both fighters were armed. Zarvos stood at the far end of the arena, fully suited in Zelvari battle armor, plasma-resistant plating, retractable wrist blades, and a high-frequency plasma spear that crackled with deadly energy. His wounds from the previous fight had been treated, but the scars remained, a constant reminder of his humiliation. Jack, by contrast, wore the same tactical vest he had before. No armor, no shields, just his combat knife, a sidearm with limited rounds, and his wits. The council looked on in eager anticipation. Orion raised his hand. The trial resumes. This time, a battle of weapons. He dropped his hand. Begin. Jack's deadly game. Zarvos wasted no time. With a thunderous roar, he hurled his plasma spear straight at Jack, the weapon spinning like a burning comet. Jack barely managed to twist out of the way as the spear slammed into the arena floor, sending a shockwave of energy through the stone. No hesitation. Zarvos was already moving, lunging forward with terrifying speed, his wrist blades gleaming. Jack dived into a roll, barely escaping as the alien strikes tore into the ground where he had just stood. Jack knew he couldn't win in a straight-up firefight. His only chance was to make this an ambush war, hit-and-run tactics, misdirection, and forcing Zarvos to overcommit. He vanished into the dust, sprinting toward the scattered wreckage left from previous battles. Zarvos snarled, "Coward, face me." Jack didn't reply. Instead, he disappeared from sight. The predator becomes the prey. Jack weaved between debris, his mind calculating every movement. The Zelvari was big, strong, and armed to the teeth, but he wasn't used to fighting an enemy he couldn't see. Jack reached into his vest and pulled out a handful of magnesium flares. With a quick flick, he tossed them in different directions. They ignited instantly, throwing blinding light into the dust-choked air. Zarvos roared in frustration, his enhanced vision overwhelmed by the sudden glare. He slashed wildly, but he was swinging at shadows. Jack moved. He darted low, silent as death, slipping behind Zarvos in an instant. Then, with ruthless precision, he jammed his combat knife into the exposed joint behind the Zelvari's right leg. Zarvos screamed, staggering forward. Jack didn't stop. He ripped the knife free, spun around, and slashed at the warrior's lower back, cutting through weaker armor plating. Dark green blood sprayed across the ground. The crowd gasped. The kill shot. Zarvos, enraged, whirled around, swinging his wrist blades in a desperate counterattack. Jack ducked, barely missing the lethal arc. Then, in one smooth motion, he pulled his sidearm, pressed it against Zarvos' exposed neck, and pulled the trigger. The gunshot rang out like thunder. The plasma round pierced straight through the Zelvari's throat. Zarvos staggered, choking, his massive frame swaying as dark blood poured from the wound. His blades dropped from his hands. His legs buckled. Then, with a final gasp, the mighty warrior collapsed onto the arena floor. Silence. The council sat frozen. Then, the impossible happened. The crowd erupted into cheers. The SEAL's victory. Orion rose to his feet, his voice booming over the arena. The human, Jack Carter, is the victor. Virox, face twisted in rage, slammed his fist on the table. This is a disgrace. A fluke. Jack wiped the sweat from his brow and holstered his weapon. He turned toward Virox, a slow smirk spreading across his face. Say that again, and I'll make you the next one in the arena. The council chamber erupted in stunned murmurs. Virox, for the first time, looked uncertain. Jack rolled his shoulders, cracked his knuckles, and smirked. Still laughing? The Galactic Council never laughed at humanity again. The echo of Jack's victory still hung in the air. The arena, once filled with laughter at humanity's expense, was now buzzing with awe, shock, and a growing sense of respect. Zarvos lay motionless, his once mighty form crumpled on the blood-stained floor. The Zelvari warrior, one of the most feared combatants in the galaxy, had been beaten twice by a lone human. Jack Carter stood over him, blood-streaked but unbroken. He turned to face the Galactic Council, locking eyes with High Commander Virox, who sat in stunned silence. The arrogant golden-skinned general, who had mocked Jack at the start of this trial, now looked like he had swallowed a mouthful of acid. Jack smirked. "What's wrong, Virox? Cat got your tongue." The council chamber murmured. Even those who had doubted humans were now watching with newfound interest. Orion, the elder counselor, finally rose from his seat. His expression was unreadable. "Human, you have proven your strength. Twice. Such a feat cannot be ignored." Jack crossed his arms. "Damn right it can't." Orion continued, his voice carrying across the silent chamber. "It is clear that humanity is more capable than we assumed. Perhaps we have misjudged your kind." Jack chuckled. "That's one way to put it." Rachel Donovan, standing at the edge of the chamber, watched with a mix of pride and disbelief. Humanity had gone from being a joke to a force the entire galaxy had to take seriously, all because of one man. But Jack wasn't done yet. The SEAL's warning. Jack turned toward the seated council members, his gaze sweeping over the various alien dignitaries. Some looked impressed, others wary. Then He zeroed in on Virox. Jack took a slow step forward, blood from his shoulder wound still seeping into his tactical vest. He gestured towards Zarvos' unconscious form. "That was your best warrior." Jack asked, his tone mocking. "Seriously? You all were laughing at humans, acting like we were nothing, and yet I just dropped this guy twice." Virox bristled. He was unprepared. "You fought dishonorably." Jack snorted. "Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want me to fight like a dumbass? Walk into your claws, let you stab me a few times?" He shook his head. "This wasn't dishonor, pal. This was war." He let the words hang in the air, making sure they sunk in. "You thought we were weak because we don't have intergalactic empires, because we're primitive." Jack's voice grew colder. "But I'll let you in on a little secret. Humans don't play fair. We play to win." Orion studied him carefully. "A dangerous philosophy." Jack grinned. "Only for our enemies." A shift in power. The murmurs in the chamber grew louder. Some council members, once dismissive of humanity, were now glancing at each other with concern. If one human, a single soldier, could take down a Zelvari warrior, what did that say about the rest of humanity? Rachel saw the change happening in real time. The entire balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted, because now they feared humans. And fear? Fear was power. Virox, however, wasn't ready to accept defeat. "This trial proves nothing in the grand scale of war," he growled. "A single warrior means nothing when faced with an armada." Jack raised an eyebrow. "That's so." Virox sneered. "Your kind may be impressive in single combat, but your world is defenseless. You lack fleets, planetary defenses, or any real military might. If we wished, we could wipe out your species in a single cycle." Jack's smile didn't fade. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a small data chip. He held it up for the entire chamber to see. "Yeah, about that," he said, his voice calm but laced with quiet menace. Virox narrowed his eyes. "What is that?" Jack tossed it to Rachel. She caught it, inserted it into her wrist pad, and projected the data into the air. A holographic display appeared, showing video footage from Earth's military archives. Tactical strikes, precision bombing runs, advanced maneuver warfare. It showed SEAL teams operating behind enemy lines, U.S. Marine Force recon units clearing cities in record time, fighter squadrons executing perfect dogfights, and then nuclear detonations. A shockwave of silence rippled through the chamber as they watched mushroom clouds bloom over test sites, shockwaves tearing across barren landscapes. Jack crossed his arms. "We may not have space fleets yet, but when it comes to war, we've been real good at it for thousands of years." He let the images speak for themselves. The council watched in stunned silence, some clearly disturbed, others deep in thought. Jack took a step forward. "You ever hear the phrase, mutually assured destruction?" he asked casually. Orion's gaze was sharp. "Explain." Jack smirked. "It means that if anyone ever tries to wipe out humanity, we'll make damn sure we take them with us." Virox's confidence faltered. "Good." A newfound respect. Orion finally spoke. "You have made your point, human." He turned to the rest of the council. "We must reconsider our stance on Earth. They are not as primitive as we believed." Virox clenched his fist but said nothing. He had lost. Jack rolled his shoulders. "So, what happens now?" Orion glanced at Rachel, then back at Jack. "Earth will be recognized as an independent power within the Galactic Council." Rachel's eyes widened. "Are you saying?" The elder counselor nodded. "Humanity will be given a seat at the table." The chamber erupted in shocked gasps and murmurs. Virox snarled, but he knew there was no fighting it. Jack smirked. Victory. Aftermath. As the chamber emptied, Rachel turned to Jack, still trying to process what had happened. "Do you realize what you just did?" Jack shrugged. "Want a knife fight?" She stared at him. "You just got her the seat on the Galactic Council." Jack grinned. "Huh, neat." Rachel shook her head in exasperation. "You're impossible." Jack chuckled. "That's what makes me dangerous." Behind them, High Commander Vyrock stormed out of the chamber, his fury barely contained. Jack watched him go, eyes sharp. He knew this wasn't over. No! This was just the beginning. Epilogue. The Seal's Legacy. Months later, Earth officially joined the Galactic Council. Humanity, once mocked as weak, was now a respected and feared player on the interstellar stage. And Jack Carter? He became a legend. The alien races told stories of the human warrior who had humbled a Zelvari, defied a high commander, and forced the galaxy to respect Earth. Some feared him, some admired him, but one thing was certain: no one laughed at humanity ever again.